Good afternoon, everyone. We're delighted to have all of you here with us as we continue the journey of ideas, stories, and conversations. Our first guest today is a master of the atmospheric and the airy, a writer who seamlessly bridges the gap between ancient myths and contemporary fears. It is my pleasure to welcome Mr. K. Hari Kumar, an acclaimed author and screenwriter whose work has redefined how we look at Indian folk memory. Known for his genre-bending approach, Mr. Kumar doesn't simply tell stories. He creates immersive worlds where history leaves its residue and where the line between the known and the unknown quietly blurs. Whether through his chilling novels or his compelling screenwriting, he has a remarkable ability to explore deep-seated themes of fear, identity, and belonging. Today, he joins us for a special craft session that dwells into the architecture of storytelling and navigates the ethical tensions that shape modern narratives. To engage in this special conversation with Mr. Hari Kumar, we have Dr. Poonam, an academician and associate professor of English in the Department of Language, Culture and Society, and a passionate scholar of literature and culture. We are certain that this interaction between Mr. Hari Kumar and Dr. Poonam will be both insightful and truly captivating. Now please join us in watching a small video dedicated to the guest.
I'll start with the question.
Now ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming them both.
A warm welcome to you, sir, for SRM LitFest 3.0 SAHITYA 2026. Sir, let me start by showing you my sense of gratitude. You wouldn't remember, but you were there, although online, for the viva voce of my researcher scholar, Ramya. Thank you so much. That meant a great deal. On that point, sir, when she started her research in the year 2021, there were few books. When the Strangers Meet, The Other Side of Her, The Frequent Visitor, and there was collection of short story. In 2025, when she finished her viva voce, you had already published dozens of books, marking a remarkable journey from contemporary author to this prominent voice of Indian Gothic writer based on the folktale-based storytelling. So, sir, I would like to have your reflection on this shift in the thematic focus.
First of all, I would request you to keep all the terminologies simpler, because I am not from a literature background, I'm not from an academic background. All of the scholars here, the professors here, I feel I would have been very lucky, I would have been very fortunate had I been here when I was studying. I come from an engineering background, so my education has been very different. And that time was also very different. As for what you said, I don't focus on folklore, okay. When I started, I never planned that I'll become a writer of horror or of mythology or anything. I just wanted to write, okay. And there's another correction, it's not a dozen books, it's 9 books so far. Another one is coming up in for Diwali with HarperCollins again. But there was just dream of a middle-class boy. And the dream wasn't actually writing books, it was making films. So I grew up idolizing the works of Maniratnam sir, Tim Burton, Ashutosh Gowarikar. So all these directors, their stories. I was just discussing about how the effect of sitting in a theater and watching the films with Vikram here. So all these films which I watched as a kid, as a teenager, in theaters, you know, with the sound. I mean, just the way we experienced that Nagamandala performance here. That was where the whole inspiration and fascination started. To tell stories. The medium for me at that time, in my the desire was films, but obviously it was not accessible for an average middle-class Indian family. You had no contacts, nothing. So the next step was, what else can I do to tell my stories? And it was a time when blogging was starting. Anything wrong? So blogging was trending at that time, and I started writing these small, short stories on the blogs and everything, and there were people who were reading it, and they were appreciating what they were reading, and that's how I decided that I would start writing books. So the thing started from films, and the journey continued to books. I mean, the journey actually started from books. Then yes, like your scholar, when she started, she must have, I remember she had contacted me long back, and at that time I had written just 2 books. Other side, this was Frequent Visitor and When Strangers Meet. When Strangers Meet was my first book. And, but yeah, I mean, 2025 I've written 9 books, out of which 7 are fiction, and the last 2 were non-fiction. And that's where I have actually entered into this new territory of regional mythology and folk-based deities. So that's what I wouldn't call it research, because then it goes into a different tangent, because people sitting here are the actual researchers. I'm more of a writer, and I would like to call myself a writer. So yeah.
So talking about your first book, it's about a boy who runs away to do animation because his father wanted to become an engineer. How much of that is in your own life?
I think I've already revealed half of the answer in my introductory question. Like I said, I wanted to tell stories, I wanted to make films, and that boy in When Strangers Meet, his name is Jay, he's a reflection of my desire. But I couldn't do that. I had a lot of pressure on me, and I had seen the sacrifices that my parents had made. So that put even a bigger pressure on me to follow what the conventional the degrees were. Because at that time, when I was doing when I passed out of 12th class, engineering was the thing. Everybody was rushing after engineering, because that's how you get a comfortable job and a comfortable life, a convenient life. So When Strangers Meet, I wrote it in 2010. It was after I started, I was trying to write a lot of stories. Short stories I could write small poems and everything, but to write a novel of 50,000, 60,000 words, it's not a piece of cake. Especially when you don't have training in that particular creative art. I'm not trained to become a writer. I didn't study literature. I had nobody to tell me this is how you write, except for my English teacher, whom I'm very grateful to, because she is the one who used to say, do it. Keep writing, keep writing. So I didn't know how to outline a story. I didn't know what are the literary devices to use, nothing. I just cooked up a story. I visualized a story, and I would start writing. But when it came to the long form content, when I'm talking about novels, I could never complete a novel. I would start my manuscript, I'd write 5 or 6 chapters, 7 chapters, 10 chapters, and then I'll stop. But it so happened that in 2010 I had fallen ill. This was my final year of engineering, and I contracted a viral infection which put me on bed for almost the entire year. I couldn't go to college, I couldn't eat anything, my whole entire metabolism started failing, and it was at that point of time when I started asking myself, because my life became so uncertain, even the doctors were not able to find a proper cure for what was happening, and I had lost weight, I had lost around 30-35 kgs, and at that point in life I was like, if tomorrow doesn't come, what should I do today? I got the idea of a story. I thought I would write my story. That's how I started writing the story, and it was actually an apology to my parents, but at the same time it was me trying to live a life which I didn't in real life. So I was in the final year of engineering, but the protagonist in my story, he runs away from home after 12th. So I was completely imagining what was happening and everything, and so that's how the first book happened. So it's not autobiographic, but it's semi-autobiographic.
Sir, as you said that you are from engineering background, so how does that analytical mind of you engages with ghosts and spirits?
You ask questions. Regarding horror, so for the audience here who may not be accustomed to my works, I started with When Strangers Meet. It was my first book, urban fiction, a slice of life story. The second, third books were horror. And the reason for going into horror is there are two aspects of it. First one was the stories that I've heard from my grandparents, my grandmothers especially, from both the maternal and paternal sides. They used to tell me all these stories about Yakshis and Pishajas, Peis and everything, and back when I was a child, and that used to fascinate me. And then there were these stories of Vikram Vetal that my mother used to read from Chanda Mama. This used to be a periodical, I think the seniors would be aware. So these were the stories, the visuals, they were always getting embedded in my head. And the second aspect, that came when I fell ill in 2010. Because of that whole question, if tomorrow never comes. Mind, when you're ill, when you're bedridden, when you don't see anything ahead of you, you start going inward. And it was at that moment I was like, what happens after death? And that very question is a foundation for, I think, every religion, every folk belief, and for horror. Because horror comes, I'm talking about the supernatural horror, not psychological horror or anything. Even fear for that matter, it's an interpretation again. Fear, they say, don't take this path, a snake might bite you. Why don't you take that path? Because the snake will bite you and you might lose your life. So again, somehow it's the fear of death and the uncertainty of what happens after death, which kind of inspired me to go into this whole horror and supernatural genres. But eventually, it led me to folk religions and mythology and spiritual interpretations of life, of existence. But those are broader categories now.
So would you say, like, we all have grown up listening to the grandmother's story. So does that monsoon-filled Kerala grandmother's story shaped your personality as a writer?
So, previous question, I'll just finish that. I think that analytical mind helps me inquire all these things. Like, what happens after death? I start inquiring. Okay, this could be a possibility. Maybe you will wake up in another life. Maybe this is all a dream. Maybe we actually end up waking in a real self, if this is an illusion, that's simulation theory for you. Or there is nothingness, that's shunyata. So, as an engineer, I think, and not an engineer, I wouldn't say that, but that analytical mind keeps you, makes you skeptic, makes you ask questions, and that's exactly how we should tackle with most of the things in life. Otherwise, we just accept what is being thrown at us and we keep moving. As for the second, so this question, I was brought up in Delhi. Yeah, so when I was a kid, when I was in second, third, at that time, summer vacations was a time when I was the most excited. Because that's the time when we'd pack our bags and go back home to Kerala. And in Kerala, it's a small village in Thrissur where my grandmother used to live, and it's a completely different setting. Delhi, Gurgaon, it's all concrete and very dry, very sunny. Kerala, it's so peaceful, calm, big trees, and the nights, it's beautiful. And we had power cuts back then. And my grandmother and all of us cousins would just line up and sit there, and she would tell us stories. And those are the times when I demand from her, tell me that Yakshi story you told me about, the Yakshi who used to haunt this Padam. Padam is the field, the paddy field where, So those stories, when she used to narrate those stories, like I said, I have a filmmaker's vision. So I would start visualizing those things even as a kid. It was not only about listening, it was always about watching it when she would narrate it. So those visuals stayed with me, and as I grew up, those visuals kind of started coming out in the form of my stories.
Sir, you mentioned about Yakshini and the spirit stories. So, whatever movies which we have seen before, in those stories, those Yakshinis are portrayed as a very evil spirit. But in your books, they are the victim of the society who had been wronged. So, what is your take on that? Like, you have a very different take.
So all the stories that I have watched or I have read about or I've heard from my grandmother, the Yakshi was portrayed as an evil woman in white with fangs. She would drink blood. If you go towards the Hindi heartland, you get the concept of chudels. Okay. If you go towards east, you'll get Dains and Dahinis. Okay. Everywhere, the most dreaded supernatural entities are always female. And the stories won't tell you about their life. It will always tell you about the life from the perspective of a man. A man who was trapped by a chudel or by a yakshi, and how she sucked the life out of him, and in the end they had to call some exorcist and exorcise this yakshi, and then everything was fine. Even Nagamandala, if you look at that, the original story, it's very similar. You end that story there. But nobody talks about why she became a yakshi. Why did a woman become a chudel or a dayan? So for me, when I was writing, I started thinking, maybe I should write from that perspective. Maybe I should write from the perspective of the yakshi, why she became a yakshi. And why is she haunting this place? She could always go back to heaven or whatever it is, or she could have a normal life with other yakshas. Why is she haunting? Why is she targeting men? So that patriarchal nature of the society kind of brings that angle to this. Patriarchy, unfortunately, kind of likes to smash women who were independent or rebellious at their time, and then they were labeled as yakshis or chudels. And eventually we started telling stories, and the stories were passed from one generation to another, diluted and remixed, and what we hear today is passed through several layers of filtration. But when I started writing Dakini is the book which it was my last fiction with HarperCollins, and I had heard about women who were hanged for practicing black magic. They were labeled as Dayans. Okay. In Odisha, they are called Dahinis. In Bihar, Jharkhand, that region, they are called as Dayans. And most of these are women from outcast communities. The moment their husbands lose their life, when the husbands die and they are widowed, that's when these women are, they become the target of a lot of other people. They are outcasts, they live like outcasts, they are even executed. There are reports of this in the newspaper. When I read one of those reports, I was very angered. I was very enraged. And that's how I started researching about Dayans, and I realized that the word Dayan actually comes from Dakini. And Dakini is not a negative word. I mean, for those who are who know Malayalam, they might be aware of Dakini as a character from a popular comic strip. But other than that, the Dakini is part of the attendants of the Ganas of the Devi. So how can somebody who is an attendant of the Devi be evil? So that's how that book happened. And in the book, I have written from the perspective of the Dakini, not of the lover or the landlord or the villain. No. My character, my protagonist is a Dakini. Now you read.
That's a lovely perspective, sir. And we all have seen the movie Kantara. You have written the book Deva on that. So, what would be the difference between the ghost and the spirit deity? As you have mentioned that we should be respecting them instead of being afraid of them.
The difference is context. Okay, when we say ghost, again, the reason why right now we are speaking in English, that's why it might be very confusing. The Hindi word or the Indian word for ghost is bhoot. And the deities who are worshipped in the South Canara or the coastal Karnataka region, they are also known as Bhuta. Bhoot. So when Kantara came out, a lot of people started researching about what is this, and when they would write it on Google and Wikipedia will show up that people are worshipping Bhutas. So the interpretation is people are worshipping ghosts. For a non-Tuluva, for a North Indian or for somebody who's not from the region, when you read it in English, the people worship bhoots, and they're like, oh, they're worshipping ghosts. So that interpretation is very incorrect. And when I used to go around, and I come from that region, my ancestors come from that region. Although I belong to Kerala, but my ancestors, they migrated from the Tulu-speaking region to Kerala. I still have retained my mother tongue as Tulu. And when people started asking questions as to, do you worship ghosts? I was like, no, it's not ghosts exactly. It's ancestral worship. These were people who lived at one point of time in that society, in that community. Some of them passed away in tragic instances and now they've been deified. And there are other folk deities who have come from some Puranic gods or some regional gods or subaltern gods. And for the people, these are spirit deities. These are not ghosts. The ghosts, the right word should be preta. Preta. Bhoot comes with a very different connotation. But somehow the colloquial way of using bhoot, especially in Hindi, kind of creates this impression that people in the south, especially in these regions, are worshipping ghosts. It's not true. It's part of their religion, it's part of our tradition. And when it's part of a tradition, you may or may not accept it as right. But when people are worshipping it, give that respect, is what I feel.
So you mentioned that your great-grandfathers, they were Tulu. So I recently watched a podcast in which you were telling that how an astrologer helped you to reveal that secret regarding the pond. So would you like to share that story with us?
That podcast is heavily edited. Okay. An astrologer didn't really help me there. It would be wrong. I mean, I have actually mentioned this in my book Daiva, in the first page itself, that the journey didn't begin with an astrologer. Okay. What happened was that I was facing some issues in life, in career and everything. My mother was very worried. And like most of the Indian mothers in little villages, she took my kundali, horoscope to an astrologer. She started checking and everything. And he just said that you need to go back to your Kuladevata. And this is a very generic information which every elder in the house gives. And even when you look at the spirit deities of our land, they are also similar to the Kula Devatas in the north and other parts of the country. They're all ancestral gods, right? So that is what had happened. It was not a miraculous remedy or something. I mean, the way it has come out in that podcast, it's very misleading, because after that a lot of people have asked, who is that astrologer? Give me his number. I was like, it's just generic information. You come to me, I'll also tell you the same thing. See, at the end of the day, there are certain traditions that, for example, Naga worship. Although these days it's not that popular, but still people who are living abroad, when they face some problem in their life, the elder would tell them, maybe it's a Naga deities or maybe it's your ancestral Kula Devata who is not getting your veneration, so you go back and pay your respect. So that's that.
Sir, your other book, Naga, which is based on serpent, even the Bharatanatyam dance which we saw, it is again Naga Mandala. So as an Indian, what is our obsession with snake? Or it's only religion, or there is some secret myth or some lesson from the nature behind this snake myth, old snake myth?
So there are many aspects to this. One aspect is, like from the region where I come from, where my ancestors came from, when I say Naga, I'm referring to the Indian cobra. Only the Indian cobra. Not the Russell's viper or any other snakes. We were discussing that earlier. The Naga that we are talking about is called the Pratyaksha Devata. Pratyaksha Devata means the god who is visible. Rest of the gods you can't see. You have to see it in an idol, in a stone, or maybe you just have to pray to an invisible figure. But with Naga, the interpretation is that it's a god who appears, and when it appears, you pray, it will leave. Okay. As for the mythical part, the belief, I'm just talking about the belief. I'm not claiming this is what is the reality. I'm just claiming, which is what my book also does. It just talks about what the folk beliefs claim. Folk belief claims that there is an underworld, a netherworld, Patala, which most of us must have heard. Patalam, Patal Lok, where all these Nagas reside. And they have their own world, and through these anthills, it's exactly not an anthill, it's a termite mound. Through the termite mound, they enter and go towards their land where there are a lot of treasures. This was the old belief. Okay, and the Naga deities, they are believed to bestow longevity and fertility. In fact, when I was watching Nagamandala, that was my interpretation. Maybe the husband was impotent in the performance, and the Naga was the potent one, and the woman, she was longing for a child. That's my interpretation, because back in our region, even in Kerala, there are a lot of Sarpakavus. Sarpakavus are the, these are not temples, okay, but these are open spaces where there are serpents' idols that are installed. The puja is done to the idol. But in these places, you're not allowed to dig, you're not allowed to cook, you're not allowed to light fire, because the cobras, they freely move around. It's a whole ecosystem where the biodiversity is still conserved. And back in the olden days, every family is associated with a Nagabana or a Sarpakav. Nagabana is the Kannada word for the Sarpakav. An English word will be a serpent grove or a sacred grove. It was sacred because you're not allowed to chop down the trees there. So even today when you go there, you see we had a Nagabana, and that was my journey, looking for the ancestral Nagabana that my ancestors worshipped. This was somewhere in Suratkal in Karnataka. There was a highway, completely bland, bald as in no trees, nothing, just a highway. Shops on either side. You take a ride, you go another 1 kilometer, very hot, very humid, and then you enter a forest-like area, which was Nagabana. And once I entered inside, no sound of horns, no sound of honking, no vehicles, no heat. It was as if I'm in an air-conditioned environment, and just the Nagakallu there, and whatever is growing there. So the ancestors, our ancestors, they found a way to preserve that natural ecosystem by putting all these guidelines and rules that don't chop the tree, or the Nagas will curse you. Okay, don't light a fire here. In a way, that's what we need today, because looking at the kind of environmental changes we are doing in the name of development, somewhere something has to stop, and there you need this fear that there is a God watching you, and it could be any God, okay, not mine or yours, it could be any God. There's a God watching you who's going to make you pay for what you did, karma.
Preserving the nature, yes. So your book, India's Most Haunted. What I have heard is that you would have visited more than 50 places when you were doing research on that book. So what inspires you? How do you find these stories?
So India's Most Haunted happened in 2018, and that was my first book with HarperCollins. So it was not my idea initially, okay. I got a message from the editor. She asked me, would you like to write a book based on these haunted places, or rumored or alleged haunted places in India. And for me, it was very interesting because, like I said, I wanted to inquire what happens after death, or what happens to, do we really become spirits? These spirits who once died, who are haunting this place, why are they haunting? What is the because the most common concept with the hauntings is that there is some unfulfilled desire or unfinished business in life, and the person dies. When he becomes a ghost, then it's that desire which keeps bringing them back to haunt. So I was really wondering, is that what happens? So when I got this offer, I said I'll do it. But then the thing was 50 different locations. And when I started the research, I realized that more than 80% of the stories were similar, exactly the same. Somebody died, somebody took revenge, somebody had a desire, somebody did this. In the end, they came back as a ghost and started haunting. I didn't visit all the 50 places, okay. I jotted down the most unique 50 places which are supposed to be haunted. Some of these places I had heard or I had visited long back with my friends during college, or maybe there is a place which is believed to be haunted right next in my village. So that's some place I've seen since I was a child. What I have realized is, when you go to a place, it could be a lonely hillside or an abandoned church or something. The moment you see an abandoned church, something triggers. I think we were talking about the railway station in Velachery in the morning. The moment you enter, something triggers. You feel like it's haunted. Okay. More than that, if you go to a place which is believed to be without the knowledge that it's haunted, you won't feel scared. At least I don't feel scared. But the moment somebody tells you it's haunted, or you go with that knowledge that it's haunted, that suggestion triggers something, and your mind starts wondering, oh, is it haunted? Did I see this here? Did I see that here? I think that's what I have found. I didn't find any place which did something very scary to me at all.
So, have you ever witnessed any situation in which your logic completely failed you?
I did. I mean, a couple of times, and one of the times was when I was researching for Daiva in a place called Karkala in Karnataka. So I was at my wife's ancestral place, and this is like a very small village, just one house here, the next house is like 10-15 minutes away, and at night there's no electricity, and it was during the rainy season, and we actually had a Ashlesha Bali, which is a ritual to appease the serpent deities. Okay, and a lot of guests had come at home, and that was the first time I was visiting this particular ancestral house of my wife. And in that region, there's this Grama Devata, a Chamundi, was like near, there's a small sthana or a place of worship for the Chamundi near the house, and the night of the Ashlesha Bali, I was sleeping in the hall with a lot of other relatives, and I got this very weird dream where I am in that exact space. It's like an astral projection of myself, and I can see myself moving, and at one point there's a hand, just a hand, nothing else. It was pointing towards this direction, and I felt very weird, and I woke up. The very next day I spoke to my wife. I told her I got this dream. I kind of dismissed it casually, okay, because I like to recollect my dreams. That's something I do every day. Gives me ideas to write, okay. That day I told her, this is what happened. I saw a hand, it was pointing this side. In the village, people interpret it differently, okay. Everything, every movement in the, even the rustle of a leaf is like an omen there. And they were like, that side, oh, there's a sthana of Chamundi there, that's the village, that's the Grama Devata, and she's very fierce, she's Chamundi, okay, and maybe you should go and pay a visit, since you are the new entrant into this family, and this house is a family's ancestral house, so maybe that's why she's calling you. I said, okay, I'll see, and then I forgot. But that night, everybody and the guests had all gone. We were the only 4 or 5 people back in that really old house. It's very scary, to be honest, at nights. And we were sleeping, and Next day morning we were supposed to leave for Mookambika, which is another temple in Kollur. And the early around 1 o'clock or sometime, I suddenly wake up and I couldn't move my body. I felt there was somebody standing behind me. Sleep paralysis happens, but the feeling of somebody is actually in front of you. It's never behind you. So I don't know if it was sleep paralysis or what. I couldn't move. I was perspiring. I was sweating. My heartbeats were very high. I couldn't move. I was feeling very scared. And that is that moment when I prayed. I prayed to, since I heard about Chamundi, see again, that suggestion works there. I prayed to Chamundi. I said, I'll visit you. Please give me a sign that you are here. And out of the blue, there was this old window and a black cat comes inside, sits in front of me in a very assuring way. And I felt very protected, and then I slept. Okay. Cats actually symbolize the mother goddess in a lot of regional tales, and even in Hindu Puranas, Shera wali mata ke saath Shera hoti hai. Shera is the big cat. Yeah, because cats are supposed to be very possessive mothers. Okay. So I don't know what happened. The next day I went to that sthana, I paid my respect. After that, I've been there hundreds of times. I never felt anything at all. It's been but every time I go there, I pay my respect and come to the house. I don't have an explanation here. Maybe it was very personal, maybe it was, but the thing is, it's a tradition for the people, and the people there were very happy that me as an outsider is coming and worshipping their deity, so yeah.
So about dreams, many of your ideas you have mentioned come from your dreams and you write them as you mentioned. So do you think that dreams are maybe a kind of portal which we haven't explored it yet?
There are many concepts about dreams, okay. The most scientific one is that it's created by the mind, whatever is in your brain. There's a very interesting concept given by Madhvacharya which says that the dreams that you see are actually figments of another reality. Which means that, like for example, we are talking to each other right now, there's an audience here, some of them may be sleeping, some of them may be listening, but we are real because we feel that we are real, we are conscious that we are real. According to this interpretation, in the dream, whatever the dream may be, the characters in the dream would also feel conscious about their existence. And if that is the case, then that is reality, which makes us what? See, these are the things which kind of makes you ask these questions to yourself, which means that we could also be characters in somebody's dreams, and when that person wakes up, we might just fade away. This is one of the interpretations. This is one of the theories about dreams. Okay, there's another theory that dreams are all illusions, and there's Advaita which says that life itself is an illusion. Maya, sab moho maya hai. Again, the same theories, different interpretations. So for me, I feel that this could be possible, that there is a super consciousness which connects all of us. We are not aware of it because we are all involved with our individual consciousness. And the dreams that we see is based on what we experience every day. But if there is super consciousness which is connecting everybody, then there could be other people's experiences which is coming into your dreams through this interconnectedness, which is somewhere synchronous with the synchronicity theory of Jung. So yeah, that's how I see dreams. It's not easy to answer this question because I'm still seeking, I'm still trying to understand. It's very interesting because when I wrote my first book, I had dreamed of those scenes when I was a kid, and those scenes had stayed with me. And when I was writing this book, a couple of characters got into this story because I had seen those characters in the dream. And even in Dakini, I had certain dreams and I used those dreams in the book, and now the protagonist is having dreams. So again, are you part of somebody else's story is what I'm trying to say here.
Sir, what is with the human brain? Like, being scared is not a very comfortable emotion, but we buy books, we go to the movies only to get scared. So how is this brain wired with being scared?
Don't you like people like me making some money?
Of course, sir.
No, see, at the end of the day, horror or these ghost stories, those were told by our grandmothers so that we could be disciplined. Why? Because fear works as an emotion. If you have a fear of a certain thing, okay, if I'm in college and I'm not afraid of anything, I'll do whatever I want, right? Any fine, any rule, any law is what? It's actually putting that fear factor into your mind so that you follow certain rules and guidelines. So I think that's what it is. But very few people actually go to theaters looking for the thrill of getting scared. I don't think most people go for getting scared. People go for watching good movies. See, the thing about horror as a genre is that it has the lowest fan following. Be it movies, be it books. Horror books in India are the worst sellers. Romance books, mythology books, thriller books, they sell like anything. They have maximum readership. Films, action films, epic films, comedy films, romance films, maximum viewership. Horror, you either have to club it with comedy or some big actor or something, only then you will get the eyeballs. Why? Because horror has a very small group of fans. It's a very niche category. So that's what I said. Very few people actually go for the thrill of getting scared. Because after a while, most of the horror films or the horror books, they start feeling the same. And that's the problem with Gothic genre as well. It becomes very repetitive because there is nothing else you can explore other than whatever is given there. And the horror in the country, in India, that's where we need to move on. The West has found different ways to get horror. But here we are still stuck with the same old Haveli and the big banyan tree. Even I use that, but we are still stuck in that era.
The words, the books often sound very cinematic. So when it goes from the book to screenplay adaptation, does it changes the story? Is there a shift in the story to adapt to the screenplay?
There are two different things. Okay, first thing is, if the writer has visualized a story, it's going to be that writer's perspective. Okay, but when it comes to a screenplay, it depends whether the writer is writing from a director's perspective or just from the screenwriter's perspective. If it's a director's perspective, then it is exactly how you want to see the film on the screen. The grammar itself changes. The grammar itself changes. When you're writing a book, you can actually write a lot of monologues. Okay, you can write a lot of, you can use a lot of words to tell the reader what the character is feeling or what the character is saying. Okay, because the reader there is in God mode. Okay, it's not restricted. But when it comes to screenplay, your writing has to be very clear and precise, because you will only write on that paper what the audience is going to see on the screen, what the director is trying to show. Okay, this is the major difference in manuscript writing and script writing, because there your medium is the screen and the audio. Okay, now when I was, luckily I haven't adapted anybody else's novels. I've only adapted my novels. 2 of them were adapted. First one was The Other Side of Her. It became a web series called Brahm in 2018. The second one is my last book, Dakini. I'm working with a director called Patrick Graham, and we were working on that adaptation. The thing is, I already know I've visualized the story the way I want it to, so it's easy for me to convey in a very filmmaker's perspective to another filmmaker. But for other writers, it could be difficult because they may have perceived it in a very different way.
Sir, in the movies we have like background score, we have the facial expression and many things. How do you create this environment of, thrill and suspense and horror just with the language?
Actually, you can't. Writing a book is the most difficult thing. You never know how the reader is going to interpret what you're writing. And see, the thing about a film is, if it's a scene where Manjulika is getting possessed, okay, or Nagavalli, Chandramukhi is getting possessed, you're seeing it as it is happening. You're seeing the final version, the final visual that the director wanted to show. There's no other way to interpret it. Okay. Later, whatever you interpret is a different thing. But visually, this is what is going to happen. But when I am reading, there is no visual. Some very interesting thing, a professor from a university in Bangalore, she had read my book Dakini. In Dakini, my protagonist is a reporter who is always wearing a salwar and a jeans. Okay. For some reason, this particular reader, she could never visualize her in a salwar. She always saw her in a sari. And that's the beauty of writing a book. You leave it to the reader. Certain things, instead of spoon feeding, this is what is going to happen, you leave it to the reader, let them visualize. And that makes it very tricky. If the reader doesn't, I'm not criticizing the reader here. If the reader doesn't have or hasn't seen a lot of horror or hasn't felt a lot of horror or those kinds of visuals, then their interpretation will be based on whatever they've seen or whatever they've heard. So yeah, writing a book, that's why is very tricky. There is no way, you can say that the way if you write, Stephen King writes awesome horror, the way he writes, I read it, I don't feel the horror. But when I see it, I feel the horror. That's because at the end of the day, you can do a lot of things with words. It always depends on the reader and the mood of the reader and the way the day went for the reader in how the reader interprets it or visualizes it.
Sir, there are many students of literature and media who would like to know that what is it to have the journey from manuscript to screenplay, like pitching in ideas, collaboration. What is the business dimension of it?
See, the business dimension is very simple. Whatever sells is taken. Whatever doesn't sell, it goes into the dusty warehouse or whatever. But the thing is, these days OTTs have also come out and there's a larger market. Theaters, unfortunately, are kind of at an all-time low. Only a certain type of movies work in theaters. Those films get bigger budgets. So if you're somebody who wants to move from book to screen, then the best thing is you write, either you go with a good publisher who has a division which looks after adaptations, or you approach an agent who looks after book to screen deals. If you go directly, then it becomes a very tedious process.
So just the last question before we take the question from the audience. There are many people who have a story in their heart, but they are very scared to put it out. So what suggestion would you give them to start the sentence with tonight?
If you want to become a writer, I'm specifically focusing on writing, okay? Storytelling can be in any form you want. You can even make a content for Insta, that's also storytelling. But for a writer, start writing.
Thank you.
After that, you can go for the other things, outlining and character sketches and everything. But first start writing. Otherwise, it's all going to be in your head. You will live a long life and then one day you'll say, I had also started writing, but then I couldn't finish it. Write, finish the writing. That's the most important part. It doesn't matter whether it's good or bad. Write.
The way your English teacher suggested you to write. Thank you, sir. Do we have any question from the audience side?
Thank you for that wonderful interview, Dr. Poonam. Just because you've been an engineering student, if I may say that, yeah. If not, what I would like to know is, now there are lots of, popular science books, and Richard Feynman being one of them. And of course, you could also connect it to our Indian belief. What he says is, and Einstein also, I believe, I'm not a scientific person, but still, he also said energy is neither created nor it is destroyed, and it stays. It is recreated and reborn. Maybe our version of rebirth, or I don't understand, I'm not sure. But he says each atom, once a person dies, everything, either it the body decomposes, or it goes back to nature, it goes back to the 5 elements. It becomes the 5 elements, he says. And it depends on the, as you said, context and the environment, where some of them may come together, some of the atoms, where some of them may take another form. So it never gets destroyed, it takes a different form. So when it, especially with people, technology and scientists and scientific people, then how are we going to kind of reconcile that with ghosts? All that, when there's no concept of just, it's like any other animal thing, your body decomposes and there's nothing left, your atoms come together when it is mentally so clear. Or are we splitting the two? Your belief, system of belief, your cultural indoctrination, and what you learn scientifically. Is there a gap between that? If not, why are you afraid of, is there a concept of ghost at all then?
Again, I'm not a man of science. As in, a scientist would, I think, by all means, dismiss the existence of ghosts or an afterlife, unless the person is actually researching into those aspects. Okay, all these comes under philosophy of existence, mythology, spiritual sciences. In fact, there's a division of there were these researchers who were actually, long back actually, there was this American scientist who was trying to understand whether there is life after death. What he did was, I'm not going to answer your question, okay, I'm going to leave it for interpretation, but I'm going to cite this small thing which I've come across. What he did was, he started measuring the weights of people who were on their deathbeds. He wanted to know what happened after death. Okay, because the whole concept of ghosts or spirits actually comes from here. After death, something inside your body goes out, it's released. So if it is releasing, then that means the weight should come down. Of course, there's a very scientific reasoning for the losing of weight and all. I'm not going into that. But when this American scientist, he was doing his research, he examined the weights of a few patients right at the moment of before death, at the after death. What he found out was that some 21 something grams was leaving the body, was reducing after death. He interpreted that the weight of the soul is 21 grams. Okay. Now, in our Puranic concepts, we talk about Panchabhutam. You mentioned the 5 elements, Panchabhutam. The soul is composed of ether and vayu, wind. So the moment these 2 elements leave your body, the weights of these elements should come down. Now, when I spoke about this somewhere else, I was asked to, a very scientific person, I think he was a doctor, he said that's because a lot of fluids leave your body at the time of death. The muscles kind of contract, and because of that, this weight is reducing. So again, it's a matter of interpretation. The scientific, see, we need scientific temperament. Scientific temperament, whatever is measurable, you measure. What is not measurable, you make theories out of it. What else can we do? Maybe someday we'll be able to prove. I think Nikola Tesla had said, everything around, everything about this existence is energy and frequencies. But can you see these frequencies with your eyes? Actually we can, it's just that we can't interpret it. We see it as you, me, her. That camera is there. The thing is, we cannot see those waves that are connecting us. The mic that is here, sound waves are coming out. We cannot see those waves. But we can experience it through the limited sensory organs that we have.
Thank you. And I remember Reader's Digest used to have this section called near-death experiences. There used to be a separate section where the people who are almost, as you said, being on the deathbed, come back and they narrate what they saw, what they experienced, everything.
In fact, even with near-death experiences, many people feel that they see a white light. Okay, but there again, it's a very Western perspective. It's mostly Western patients who claim this. People whom I've seen, and in fact, I personally had an experience, not me, but moments before passing away, my grandmother, she was looking towards the ceiling as if she could see something, and she started calling the names of her brothers who had passed away before her. And I've noticed this is very common in Indian, especially in that older generation who were living in close-knit families, the joint family systems. In fact, my grandmother was calling out their names as if she's seeing them. Obviously, the psychological reasoning is that your brain is triggering all those, like in movies, the moment before death, the director would show all these visuals of whatever happened with the character from the day one to the end of the film. Something like that. I mean, it can be interpreted either way, that maybe they're going in, they're seeing this, looking at something which is from another world, or maybe it's the brain showing figments of memories. I cannot answer that question, not qualified enough.
Thank you so much for that answer, sir. Do we have any questions? Yes.
Good afternoon, sir. That was an interesting session between Poonam ma'am and sir. So my question is, does the idea of death give power to the powerless, the so-called powerless by the society, referring to women? And is the idea of fear necessary for men to respect women?
Idea of, what's the last thing you said?
Fear.
The idea of fear, generating fear. While tracing down the whole of history, we have seen like there has been incidents of witchcraft and burning down of women everywhere out of fear, like they might be able to reciprocate these men. So is that fear necessary for these men to respect women?
If a woman was burned down so that it sets an example and a lot of men start, I don't think it's a good example. That itself shouldn't have happened. There are many stories when you look at folk tales, when you look at subaltern deities in different regions of the country. I'm not just talking about women, I'm talking about people from the outcast communities who had a tragic life or a tragic ending to their lives, but eventually they were deified, and then the people around, after a few generations, started worshipping them as deities, but their own life, if you listen to the stories, it was very tragic. So maybe you're setting an example for the future generation, but in the first place, that itself shouldn't have happened, is what I feel.
Thank you, sir.
Hello, sir. I actually have a question. Like, this is an interpretation. I just want to know your take on this interpretation. You just told that folklore, I don't like to take folklore as an innocent act of dictation among your grandparents and children, but I think that is a conscious act of politics attached with rendering folklore to the younger generation, because it makes you rooted to the culture. It also acts as a pathway to, reclaim the cultural identity. I would like to know your take on this thing, the politics of belonging in folklore.
My God, when I was writing, I never thought I'll be answering such questions. See, you have to ask questions for a writer, not for a research scholar. But I do agree that there is always politics attached. But the politics is very different from what we see these days. There are a lot of folk tales, okay, which are part of invocations to folk deities. But when you listen to nobody listens to those these days, okay? Everybody is like, okay, they're there, they're standing there, they pray, they go. Most of the time it is very materialistic. When we go to a shrine, we are mostly praying, we need a car, we need a this, we need a that, whatever is their hindrance, please remove it. But in the background, that folk song is being played where the entire incident of what happened to that person or that who's now deified, that's being recited somewhere. Nobody's even listening to that. Even in a Nagamandala performance, okay, I mean, this is a Nagamandala, even in performances, the entire story is being told, but it's hardly audible. But when you listen to those stories closely, which I had to while I was writing, when I was interpreting these folk tales, what I have realized is that there are a lot of problematic areas. There are problematic areas because these were linked with the politics of that time, of the community which is interpreting the story. Okay, I don't want to get into that because it's it's a different subject altogether. But that bias will come inside. But we are living in a very different society, in an open society, where we have to bring everyone together rather than dividing people into me, you. I think somebody had spoken about this in the morning as well. Folklore can divide, but instead of using it as a means of division, we have to bring people together. At the same time, we preserve our culture as well. I hope that answers your question to some extent.
No, sir, actually, just I want to simplify the question. Like, if we take a folklore as a part, because when I personally come from Kannur, from Kerala. So whenever I want to talk to a person from Kannur, I instantly say Muttappan or Theyyam. That is how we create a community. So can we treat folklore as a part of creating community?
So Muttappan has a very big community now. And Muttappan is now moving beyond Kannur. You open Instagram, every day you get to see a Muttappan's Theyyam. But see again, there's a deity called Koragajja. Kannur is not too far away from, Theyyam and Daivaradhana. Kolam is almost the same. It's just a regional difference. It does preserve that cultural identity. But these days, that's what I said, we have moved beyond our performance, which is restricted to a stage. Whatever you are doing, it's going on air somewhere else. A lot of other people are interpreting. That's why I said earlier, Theyyam, okay, Adaru Daivamana. Agree?
It's true, sir. True.
For the people who worship, Theyyam Daivam, Muttappan Daivamana. I'm sorry I'm speaking Malayalam here. For a person who is in Tulunadu, for them, a Kalluruti or a Kalkuda are the Daivas. The word Daiva and Theyyam are the same. Daiva becomes Daivam, Daivam becomes Theyyam. Okay. Daiva, there's another connotation, Bhuta, Kalluruti Bhuta. But somebody who is outside the region, when they hear Bhuta, what do they interpret? Bhutam, ghost. That's where we started our conversation. So, close-knit community, yes, it does preserve, but beyond that, because everything that we are saying, that we are writing, it is going to an audience that's ready to, get new things. So I think that's what worked with Kantara as well. It's very regional. Kantara is very regional, but it's worked in the entire country.
Thank you, sir.
Hello, sir. It's a wonderful session. And Poonam ma'am said we are wired, human beings are wired to this horror genre, right? So the proportion of fear, you said fear drives people, right? In a right way. So is it curiosity or fear? Which drives us towards this horror genre? The proportion of fear and curiosity. Because we tend to, though I'm a very scary person, I'm a scary cat, okay? But then I wanted to know the story, the core of the story. It drives me towards that. So is it curiosity or fear? The proportion, the ratio?
How can I give you the proportion for every single person who is sitting in this room? A very simple example. I'm not going to name the person, but a person who is afraid of enclosed spaces, okay, he would not go inside an elevator. Okay? Why? It's not curiosity. It's a phobia, right? But a person who doesn't have that fear would go inside that, right? He would rather say, out of curiosity, let's see what happens if I go inside. So this is a very subjective thing. There's no proportion, set proportion. But there are people who get a thrill out of horror. And these days horror genre has changed. It's violence that people like. There are movies where we are asked, put some more violent scenes. There was a time when erotic scenes were required. Nowadays nobody wants that because it's available freely on Instagram. No offense to anybody. But that's what, I mean, so what thrill do you get by watching violence? How many people will get a thrill out of seeing chopping somebody's hand? That's very few. So I won't be able to give you a proportion of how much is curiosity, but ask me personally, I can tell you, I watch horror film to see what the director has shown. Okay. If it's a story set in a very small village and I'm in Pune where I'm based, okay, I would love to go and watch that film because it is going to take me into a very different world. And for a lot of us writers, escaping into a different world, okay, kind of makes you want to watch horror and fantasy.
True. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Hello, sir. It was great listening to you. My question, so in my case, I was someone when I was young, I used to read a lot of horror and watch movies as well, horror movies. It was one of my favorite genres. But now I have stopped because I think it's real. Whatever, anything paranormal, supernatural, I believe it is real. And that, like, because I know it's real, I have stopped reading all of that because it scares me. So when you write, when you're writing a story, anything, I'm sure you do your research, and when you go deep into it, have you ever experienced it yourself?
Can I ask a question before that? How? So you read horror, right?
I used to. I don't anymore.
Used to, and you used to watch horror movies.
Yes.
Can you give me a proportion of how much was it out of curiosity and how much was it out of fear?
It was entertainment.
Entertainment. Okay, so that's another perspective. So when I write, I usually write late in the night, okay, and I have this habit of closing my ears with a headphone, and whatever is the scene, not all scenes are scary, okay. Horror maybe, in horror also there are different moods, so sometimes you are writing a very scary scene, and during those scenes, you're so lost in that world of your creation that you stop feeling what's outside. Okay, and once that chapter is done, you remove the headphone and place it back on the table, you realize it's 3 in the morning, okay, and you must have written about Dakini or Chudail or ghost or something, and now you just want to walk from this room to that room and you feel, oh God, is it here? But luckily I've got Alexa at home and all the lights are voice operated. So I just tell Alexa to switch on light and I feel safe.
Okay. Thank you so much for that. Also, I think this can be considered a follow-up and the last question for tonight. So when we talk about horror, and mostly the genres they cover, concepts of Dakinis and Yetis, and something that's very horrific, right? In the mind, it triggers you, it scares you on the spot. But like you said, we rein back. If we look at the origin story of it, it's what brings us back into reality, touches us in a very human manner, in a way we feel sad for that character, right? But they're portrayed in such a way that they're manipulative or they're death seekers. But in reality, it is the atrocities that has been done to them that made them behave in such a way. So in your writing, sir, like how well do you maintain, how dramatic do your characters go, and how do you maintain that with how socially affected they have been around their surroundings, who must have been really unfair with them? Yes.
I think you'll have to read my work first. You'll get the answer.
Definitely.
You'll have to put some effort there.
I have to put an effort, definitely.
Without reading what I've written, you won't be able to understand what I've put there, right? After that, if we have this discussion, then I think it would be easier. But like I said, the stories that I've written, I'm not talking about non-fiction, I'm talking about fiction, because it's fiction where you get the license or the privilege to write what you really want. In non-fiction, again, you have to be very careful, especially when you're dealing with religious beliefs. You have to be very careful not to hurt the sentiments of people. So in fiction, maybe you can pick up a Dakini or a Dakma. Try to understand what I have done there. Because like I said, I've written Dakini from the perspective of a Dakini. Whether I have done justice or not, it's your interpretation.
But yes, thank you so much for that. Honestly though, that little thought of mine popped up. I just wanted to ask the question, but it's really made me see horror genre in a different light. The fact that now I'm concentrating on the atrocities done on the affected, painted as horror, to just kind of reinterpret that and just kind of reimagine themselves and why they are and the reasons behind them. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you so much for all your answers, sir. It was a lovely conversation with you.
Thank you so much.
We now conclude the question and answer session. Now, we would request Mr. Hari Kumar to sign 2 books for us. We also request the audience to visit the bookstall outside the auditorium to get a glimpse of the wonderful books of Mr. Hari Kumar and Ms. Ruth Vanitha. Thank you, Mr. Hari Kumar and Dr. Poonam, for that incredibly immersive session. You've given us a rare look into the engine room of storytelling, showing us that a great narrative is built on far more than just plot. It's built on tension, atmosphere, and the moral choices of our characters. We're truly grateful for the craft and the ethical tension you brought to our stage today. Thank you.